AIPCon5 just happened. It's the best yet, in my opinion, for Palantir to deliver. Huge client results were revealed with tens of millions in savings, 10xing, doubling, so many cool stats showing that Palantir's value is important today for these companies. So let's just dive right into everything that happened since we've got a lot to cover. Now, first, Palantir opens up the stream right up with this backstage pass video, and after some time, look who it turns out to be. Amit here, who opens up the show, and I think this is really exciting for retail investors. So instead of opening statements, it looks like they wanted to open this up with a couple returning speakers too that we saw at last AIPCon during the mid-show. And so they focused on a few topics. First is what they've been doing the past 3 months since the last AIPCon, but also really focusing on building use cases. One industry specifically brought up a lot is healthcare, where that human element is crucial. But also they talked about externally to Palantir what has happened, and Amit talked about the community, the merch, the sheer interactions from Palantir's people that we always see from like Eliano, Chad, and even the head of energy who took a time to also speak at a live stream with Amit. And this really transitioned perfectly to that mindset around focusing on builders and developers. Palantir seeing their customers building on top of Palantir as a true foundation to their companies, and not only being just brought into their existing ecosystem as a one-off tool, but actually utilizing multiple aspects of Palantir's products. We even get a sneak preview of an example with a pickleball equipment who 10x their development speed, or applying this to use algorithms and models with time fold. And no doubt, they also talk about S&P inclusion, where it wasn't necessary for them to know they're good, but it definitely was the icing on top to see that. So the theme is really to look at all these keynote speakers and seeing their use cases, but also important to know how that can be applied elsewhere between other industries and carried over to just something similar or using that engine. And they go through some questions too for the Palantir folks where they got their thoughts on Karp's message about S&P inclusion. But still moving forward is the big attitude that embodies Palantir today, as well as the employees, and just Alex Karp leading the charge of this. And then Amit just adds in here, the journey is really just getting started from the retail perspective. So after the pregame there, a bunch of customers in between who gave their testimonials how Palantir is transforming their business today. And they close out with the wildfires there showing the impacts that Palantir has on the hardest disasters faced, which lead us to Dr. Karp's opening statements. So per usual, we've got Karp telling the story of Palantir, talking about their DPO, direct public offering, and that did upset some folks probably at the time who didn't make some money. And it also talks about all the doubters about them being profitable and cash flowing at one point to where we are today getting into the S&P 500 and proving them wrong. But it worked, and for Palantir, it's arguably one of the biggest events in his opinion that happened to them, making them a serious company. And he goes into their whole journey along the way with building alongside their partners, where Palantir ended up with the best people, customers, and use cases as the byproducts of Palantir doing what actually matters. And Karp believes large language models in the next revolution isn't only going to a couple startups, but rather to those who are able to disrupt with Palantir's products and operationalize it. So it's nothing too groundbreaking in my opinion, since we've heard these before from Alex Karp and Palantir, but I do love that he acknowledged the hard work everyone has put in for them to be where it is today. So first presenter is Trinity Rail, where they go over their journey with Palantir. And literally, he says they doubled their revenue over the past 2 years from $1.5 billion to $3 billion last year, where, during this period of rapid growth, they had witnessed their worst supply chain constraint this generation. So at their lowest point, they were at 67% on-time delivery, which really set the stage here for something needing to be fixed. So they turned to Palantir, and they built a solution to manage steel inventory, where it's able to locate and assign unallocated steel inventory to reduce excess inventory. And that's all within the system now. And they saved $30 million in 3 years with only 3 months of development. And then they walked through a demo of the solution that they built out. But Trinity Rail here showed off another use case too of optimizing their supply chain with AIP agents, where it's actually sending emails to their suppliers generated by AI and then analyzing those responses, creating so much opportunity. And then they also talk about how they were convinced about Palantir, really noting how they find the bad guys and the world's best, where that reputation preceded them and made them want to work with them. Next was Lear, who went over one of their simpler use cases where they're just looking to help their workforce and being able to solve their own problems, where they want to locate internal issues that are manually recorded and not tracked and wasn't centrally visible or solvable. And then the huge implications here is that this is being solved by non-technical users, like say an Excel person. So the user is walking through a build with AIP, finds the function that fits the kind of use case they're trying to solve, And then he points out the AIP Assist chat here. They're able to figure out how to actually put this out of the box solution and then apply it to what they're doing today. So from beginning to end, this user built out application that resolves the issue. And just think about how this applies across Lear, where end users are empowered to do this with Foundry and AIP. And you don't need to have that technical aspect. So I think that's really huge to compound over time. Next was the National Geospatial Agency presented by Vice Admiral Whitworth, which I actually covered in a video not too long ago with some of his comments around Maven users and seeing them need to 10x their user base. So now here as a keynote speaker, he had the use case demo today that showed off how the use of satellite data, where in Maven, they have tons of satellite images and need Maven and AI to process through all this data. Now, as a validated software too, the first of its kind, they show off a slide loop of images that they do with NGA, which is targeting, warning, safety, and navigation, but specifically covering targeting in the presentation, which we've all heard about also in Ukraine kind of, but he akins it to a business process where it comes down to discovering how to discover the right target and making sure you're accurate. And he ensures that his supporter commander is making the decisions here, and it's not a decision maker, which is vital to point out when talking about such a use case. And it's kind of scary, but he does bring up that picture system like global entry, which I've used to come back home from abroad in minutes versus, say, waiting an hour or two. But in comparison, he says at scale, this is thousands of times larger and dealing with much more important things, I'd say. Then we get an anticipated presentation too from Mount Sinai's health system. They're an 8-hospital health system in the New York area, dealing with tens of thousands of employees, hundreds of thousands of discharges, millions of visits, and more. Basically, they're dealing with a lot of things in healthcare. This partnership with Palantir is around their throughput with the clinical command center, and they've already gotten $2.3 million of ROI from just more bed capacity created, 354 beds also for new admissions available annually, and then a 400% increase in admissions per month to a hospital at home. So essentially, Palantir has accelerated how they can determine these millions of records of who would be qualified for this type of care, and looks to be that they're going to expand it more. Then they also cover the financial end of things with clinical details and denials, and this is a major pain point for health systems across the country. When you're getting paid by health insurers, which affects tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars over a long period of time, every denial adds up. And with the ontology, they were able to figure out the manual processes that was costing them millions in outsourced resources. But with this solution deployed, they've already got 2,500 AI letters sent to payers, 100% in FTE appeal letter writing as well, so it's much more capacity for them, and $13.5 million in annualized value from the increase in overturning of the denials. And then they also put another $1 million in projected savings from reallocating those FTEs. So then they also walked through a demo of the process at a single patient level here, but looking ahead, they are going to do more with Palantir and want to build a scaled AI treatment from end-to-end claims management. Honestly, any hospital here will find any value. I've dealt with this kind of business in my career where health systems have so much opportunity to improve revenue cycle, as well as clinical operations, inventory, and much more. But making it usable is such a hurdle, and Palantir seems to be solving this for them. Then we get to our midday break here, once again with Amit, and they had some customer guests actually share their experience, where we got Wendy's first VP of Operational Excellence, their example of how fast they've guided users with an intern with no experience at all in supply chain before, but who can just go in and actually identify issues and start working and addressing them. With the pilot program, they're focusing on how to become more efficient, where in the supply chain, they note they found a lot of things they didn't expect at first and can drive more and more value to the restaurant operators, like automating restaurant inventory, benchmarking, ordering, tracking waste, all those things. Then they had the director from Lear, who was actually the keynote speaker. He elaborated more at the halftime show about the front loading of work and fixing issues, and being able to manage this in the ontology, where they actually use the ontology to manage it at scale. And that's building a use case submission tool at their own company. So it's very meta here. Then we got Lightpoint on the healthcare side, all the things about patient care. They created an application on Foundry which started from post-it notes and became an AI-driven system that has digitized their workflows, pushing it into the hospital, where it took the 90-minute protocol here all the way down to a couple minutes for scheduling. And this rollout was epic in her words, where they can see more patients, but the key thing is that with the same amount of FTEs, they were able to bring much more value. And this use case was built out of frontline end users who are very optimistic about the future of Palantir and healthcare, even giving her a gift at the end. Then we have Eaton, who is a big industrial player. Eaton was one of the early adopters actually at the boot camps from Palantir, noting how fast you can build solutions and figure out if they'll actually work within a few days. And he notes the power of Palantir is that being good is getting the data ingested and connected. So with Palantir, who's strong at this with the ontology, helps produce the intuition that humans can't necessarily do at scale with a lot of data. And then from where they were before, he notes how much better they've gotten over time with benefits and ideas, and the problems getting solved are much more complex and interesting, and it's a win-win for the organization as a whole. And it's just so easy to distribute to the organization democratizing AI. Then they had the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children also speak. The use case is so vital here, where they utilize Palantir to manage the high volume of reports coming in to help triage. And with Palantir, they're able to identify certain reports coming in like blackmail, where time is of the essence. The analysts are being fed this visibility where they can focus on the human judgment of decision making with these cases. Then starting the second half is Komatsu on dynamic pricing around their equipment manufacturing, and you've probably seen their machines around. So the use case that they shared is their global pricing strategy, where they're dealing with pricing material groups to better reflect the market dynamics and the customer value that they can bring and deliver. With Pricing 360, their go-to-market strategies across construction and mining equipment can vary. So essentially, they want to bring all that information together and make sure the pricing strategies align, but still astute to specific regions, areas, specific equipment as well, while ensuring the throughput is increased and let people make the decisions much faster while removing the heavy prep work, which does get them to batch pricing too, which will have alerts triggered on notifying these folks here on actions they can take. And he then walks through a demo on what they've built out and notes what the next steps are, where they want to expand this outside to all of mining and construction. Then we've got Aramark, who provides food services to facilities. I've seen them actually back in the day when I was in college, actually, but I think about their business at scale. They are serving billions, millions of products, tens of thousands plus recipes, thousands of customers, and hundreds of points of sale. So with Foundry and LLMs, they were able to harmonize their point of sales data, and with the matching, they gained so much more visibility into the very specifics that they're looking at, say classifying ingredients or how those move around, or the recipes, customers, everything. They're just starting with Palantir, but they have plans to continue evolving their ontology and putting in predictive models, proactive alerting, as well as integration and more data sources to build this up. Next up is Associated Materials, where this is actually his second go-around with Palantir, but a new company, which is huge to see him running into already at multiple places of employment. One of the use cases of Palantir is getting those practical solutions. He even notes their oldest in-use application was back from 1974. So they wanted Palantir because, the first time to market, they wanted to get work quickly and start making value in 6 weeks, conducting their old legacy systems. And then the second is scale. They're able to work across business units, but also single sources of truth to make this all real and workable for the company abroad. And then culturally, the enemy is legacy. We saw this alluded to at the beginning, that they're moving forward and doubling down on what they can accomplish today, and walks through another demo where they can go through getting the more than 10 business use cases, all still relying on these legacy systems, because Palantir lets them utilize this without needing to go through a whole new ERP implementation that can take years and maybe even millions of dollars. But Palantir lets them do this today, where they can ideate and actually implement. Then we get Tampa General Hospital, one of Palantir's biggest and longest standing partners in healthcare, who always share great use cases. We've actually seen some coverage of this before, and they're really tackling a huge issue of sepsis, and she mentions the horrible outcomes that can come about here, especially on the patient end. But the hard part isn't treating, but actually identifying it early enough where intervention can save lives. And I get going from the patient care standpoint here, but sepsis is a huge cost driver too for hospitals, so no doubt there was a financial gain from fixing this, all while giving better patient care. So she talks about the biggest values that they're doing a forward deployed approach to clinical workflows, where the frontline teams can build the product for their usage, which allow them to quickly get real-time suggestions put into use for iteration and drive real improvements, all without leadership getting in the way. Then they close out with their demo of the application built out and have the closing statements of AIPCon5. Now, in my personal opinion, this is the best AIPCon once again, and I know I sound like a broken record, but it makes sense. They're changing it up, making things better, they're moving smoother. We've got Amit here rallying up the live stream, and no doubt I think this is a great addition to keep and to loop in external viewpoints of investors. And in addition to what AIPCon brings with internal and customer perspectives too. So great job once again, and hope to see more in the future. Now, to the speakers, obviously everyone's got their own 2 cents, but the biggest highlights we can't ignore are the numbers people shared. Tens of millions of dollars saved, and it adds up. Even if it's smaller dollar amounts, we've seen this happening in such fast turnaround times that the value just makes sense. or making their employees more efficient. We hear folks 10xing, doubling, saving tens of percentages, or breaking down a process from 90 minutes to way less. I think those are the most powerful statements from an investor standpoint. But obviously, for prospective customers, it's useful to see the demos here and how they actually interact from it from beginning to end and what caused them to do this and how they're applying Palantir because they're sharing what makes sense not only in the use case, but for similar ones not even in the same industry. And a lot of it comes down to getting that ontology infrastructure up and ready so you can go and sprint and start building and iterating on use cases today. And the other big thing too is that end users are empowered who are experiencing the issues firsthand. It's cool for management to see the macro and larger, bigger picture, but typically it takes too much time and playing telephone will muddy up the actual issue and solution. So getting this on the ground floor is crucial for actually sprinting with Palantir, which we saw across basically all these keynote speakers today. So lots of information. Check it out in the entirety on Palantir's YouTube channel if you'd like. It's only a couple hours long, I guess, without breaks, but let me know your thoughts below, and I'll see you in the next video.